26, 27, 28. Well, I don't know what day you guys are going to be watching this video, so I just covered 3 different days of the County of the Omer. And this Torah portion is the one we're going to figure out why we're doing that, but it's going to take a few minutes to get there. Let's go to Leviticus Vayikra, chapter 21. And a quick reading of these is, it's about the speak to the Kohanim, the priests, and it goes into a lot of different things. And the first thing we can kind of look at and go, well, I guess that doesn't pertain to me, until we go over to the renewed covenant and the writings of specifically of Peter, I think it is, and he says we are to be a royal priesthood. So I guess that the best way for us to look at this is to consider, what is the priesthood? There's so much discussion and arguments regarding the Melchizedek priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, but is it possible that people are arguing about something having really no idea what they're arguing about? Well, that wouldn't be the first time in history. So let's look at this a little bit. What is a priest? Well, a priest is the person that brings the sacrifice. It does no. What is the function of the priest? Not the form. And I'll get to those couple of words, and that's something that I talked with the guys on Life on Purpose last night about. A little bit of a commercial here. If you are not watching Life on Purpose or listening to it, I really urge you to do so. I had an amazing program last night that's available from our website. You can go to YouTube, you can go to Vimeo, you can go to any number of different places and listen to the MP3. But this thing of form or function is going to come out a couple of times today, and something we discussed last night. We can look at the form of what the priesthood is, but not really understand what the function of the priesthood is. That's much more important, I believe. One lays over into the other one. So what is the function of the priesthood? It is to serve the king. Okay? So it is to serve, and then also to instruct others in service of the king. I think that talking with Rico Cortez, all that he has done in his messages, just with him a few weeks ago up in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. And he talked about the function of the priest and how we are to be that priesthood. And so and the priesthood is about instructing other people. So if we consider that thought regarding this, that these verses, though some of them it's like, wow, that's a lot higher standard than the other people are held to. Well, is that really the message that it is to us? That as the priests, as those that are in Messiah, are called to serve him, or called to bring forth worship, praise, bring forth our life, should we not do so at a higher standard and then teach others to do the same? I can give many examples of this. But it kind of goes back to the sons of Aaron last week, or I think it was last week or the week before, that we're not told what that was that the 2 sons of Aaron did. And kind of the same as I'm going to take it on this video this week, this teaching, that if I was to go into a list of things, well, I would miss out on something. And probably you might be sitting there going, well, okay, well, I don't do that, so, it's obvious that I don't need to. No, yeah, we all need to look at our lives. But this is something that's very personal to each of us. The examining, Shaul, Apostle Paul, by the way, his name was never changed to Paul. The Greeks called him Paul. I think he continued to go by Shaul the rest of his life, and that's probably what the disciples called him also. what does he tell us? He tells us to examine ourselves. Examine ourselves to see whether we're actually in the faith. The greatest asset that we have in our lives today is the ability to assess our lives, to consider our lives. In one of the, was it Haggai, I believe it is, consider your ways. This is something that the festivals, as we get through them in just a few moments, the festivals are filled with this thought of examine yourself, consider your life, be truthful about where you are, about what you're doing. Because if we will do that, if we will be serious about the examination of our own lives, then I believe that the blessings, the favor that will come to us, it's not going to bring a life that is free of trouble. But when the trouble comes, at least I believe we will be able to make sense of what it is. And what is it after all? I mean, what is the answer to this? Why should we be living a higher standard? I know the obvious answer up front, because we're redeemed, all of those things. But what is the real focus of that higher standard for our lives than those that are around us? In this day, it takes very little time to figure out, well, I mean, compared to that person over there, wow, I mean, I am in line for sainthood. But when we compare ourselves to other people, it's kind of a trap. You can always find someone that is living a life more, could we say, godly than you are. And you can really find, it's really easy to find a great multitude of people who aren't. And so it's like, well, if I get a B+, I guess I'm doing okay. But should that be what we're actually looking for? The answer to this is actually found in the next chapter, in chapter 22, and it's in verse 2, tell Aaron and his sons to separate themselves from the holy things of the people of Israel, which they set apart as holy for me, so that they will not profane my name. Now, I understand the context of this, of it specifically speaking to here the sons of Aaron and to the Levitical priesthood of the day, but in the end, the result is the same in their lives as it is in the examination of our own lives, and that is that we desire not to profane his name. Now, if I was to say to you, okay, you have the ability to live your life, and considering the life that you're living today, everything that you do today is a choice. Okay, everything that each of us makes choices in our lives. The result is it's a result of our choices. We live in a society that wants to blame everybody else, everything else, for where they are in their life, instead of accepting the fact that the life that I'm living today is, for the most part, the result of the choices that I have made in this life. Yeah, live up to it, okay? Take responsibility for the actions and choices that we make. So, if I were to ask you today, what is it regarding the profaning, the setting apart of his name, as a friend of mine in Canada says, making God look good? What in going back to our school days, or if those of you that might still be there, what would you say the grade would be that you would desire? So if you were to be given a what do you want your grade to be? What would it be? And then the other side of that is, what do you think the grade actually is? Now, I would imagine that every single one of us would say, well, I desire to be graded A++ on this thing. But yeah, that's our desire. But how are we really doing at it? Where would you grade yourself in this concept of upholding his name, of making him look good, of making sure that we're setting a higher standard? And of course, I can hear the old system that many of us were in many years ago, and well, it's all about Messiah. It's all about him, and he's taking care of everything. And I don't know. Yeah, that's a cop out. That is a cop out for compromised living. Ladies and gentlemen, we should be striving for it. Now, am I going to make an A++ on this thing? No, I know myself. I know myself as well as you know yourself. But I can strive for a grade that is more than just average. When I was in school, if I got in the last few years, if I got a C, I mean, my mother was throwing a party over that thing because I didn't care. I didn't care about the things that they were teaching me. I was, my life was really kind of mixed up in those days. But now, having someone to live for, I desire the highest grade possible of my actions, of making him look good, of upholding his name and not profaning his name. Now, one last point on this. The word profane, if we go back to the root word of this, the root word for profane in Hebrew is to weaken his name, or could even be looked at as to bring disease into his name. We all have bodies, okay? We've gone through a couple of crazy years here lately. And what was that all about? It was about the weakening. When you bring a disease in, when a disease gets into your body, what does it do? It weakens you to the point that it can actually kill you. And so this thing of profaning his name is about, are we using his name, but then our actions in life, it is as if we are weakening by bringing this disease of sin into our testimony of who he is. See, if our testimony, if we are proclaiming the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh with our mouth, but our actions, on the other hand, are full of disease, are full of sin, what do? What is our testimony? Our testimony is therefore weakened, and because we have weakened our testimony about who he is, we have literally, I'm having a hard time talking today, we are literally profaning his name because we have not set the standard of our life that we are supposed to. We are literally called to be the representation of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh upon this earth. The question is, how are we doing? That's something that each of us has to deal with. Now, I'm going to go over to chapter 23, a little bit of a change here, but maybe not. Maybe not. So the last couple of weeks, I've taught at Life Assembly about the difference between a house and a home. I did this on Life on Purpose. In fact, the CD message that's coming out for the month of May, I'm actually recording it as soon as I get done with this, and it is on this concept that the Talmudim, the disciples in the book of John, after the first entry into the temple, that Yeshua overthrows the money changers, the tables, he disrupts the system. What is it? The verse that they think to themselves and write down later is that the zeal for his house has consumed him. Zeal for his house. Well, in order to understand that verse, I'm going to go into that in this message. You can get a copy of that from our website. It is, what is the difference between a house and a home? Zeal for his house has consumed him. Why? Because the temple in the day of Yeshua was only a house. It was an occupied house, not a house occupied by the true and rightful resident, which would have made it into a home. Now, we see this in actually being played out in the United States right now. People have, second houses, or they're not second homes, they're second house. The difference, again, I'll go into this message a lot more, the difference between a house and a home is form versus function. You cannot purchase a home. You can purchase a house and hopefully make it into a home, but when you leave, you don't sell your home, you sell your house. Your home goes with you. And your home, if you have a group of people that are living in unity, living in godliness, living in shalom, then you have a home, and it doesn't matter where you take that home to, it still remains a home. You can go from a multi-million-dollar house to an RV to, if in the end was needed, a tent, but it's still your home that is being placed into a house, a place that you are putting your home. Yeshua had zeal for his house because it was occupied by others that had no legal right to it. We see that today. People will break into a second house that someone owns. They come back and the place is destroyed. And the argument now comes through this crazy progressive thing we got. Well, who is the rightful owner now? Well, the rightful owner is the one that has the deed to it. The temple, the rightful owner is Messiah, who has the deed in the scripture to that house. And so the zeal was that he was desiring to turn the house into his home, and those that were occupying it were saying no. Go into that in that message. Regarding chapter 23 of the book of Vayikra, though, is the feasts and festivals. So let's look at it like this, that the Father has given to us a house. It was and will be a temple. It will be a home because Messiah will be ruling and reigning there. And in chapter 23 of Vayikra, we see that there are invitations for us to visit his home. Now, if it's changed in these days, but it used to be that I remember, when someone invited you to their home, to their house, which was their home, that it was a big deal. And so what do? You brought gifts. I have a friend of mine, I was kidding her the other day, that I don't think she's ever shown up to my house without bringing something. She always brings something. No matter where she goes, she's always bringing something. And why? It's a matter of respect. When we're bringing something, we're called to bring something to his house, bring something to his home during the times he's inviting us there, and that's called the feasts and the festivals. So what are these festivals? What are they about? Well, this is probably going to be very elementary for many people. I've taught them this for many, many years. It's going to be just, maybe repetitive, but maybe we need to repeat once in a while, just to make sure. So it begins not with Passover, but with Shabbat. The Shabbat was the first festival that was given in the garden to Adam and Eve. If I'm right, if you've heard me teach over the last few weeks, that the first Passover was actually in the garden, and that all of these, as Holis Allwine and many others would teach, that all of these festivals are about the return to the garden, what happened, what got us exiled from, and what will bring us back. And so the first invitation of his home was Shabbat, and it still is. Shabbat was given to us as a time to come in, to be with him, to commune with him, to rest from our labors, all of these things. So Shabbat, we could actually see is the foundation of everything that we do. Because the Shabbat it's our weekly cycle. It's something that comes at us, every 7 days. This Shabbat is coming to us, which is, okay, I need to go back and refocus. I need to examine what I did in the 6 days. I need to grade myself on the 6 days. I need to be truthful about the grade of the 6 days. And I need to allow this time to examine, maybe to reprioritize, to consider my ways. It's a time to disconnect. It's tragic how many people, even in this walk, have not figured out how to disconnect. It's not easy, okay? Let me give you that. Sometimes it's not easy. Disconnecting from the 6 days will make the next 6 days more worthwhile. Disconnecting on Shabbat, disconnecting from the previous 6 days will help us to prioritize of how to enter into the next 6 days. And this comes week after week after week. The festival that's not mentioned here, which it's kind of interesting that it's not mentioned, it's whispered. I mean, it's there. You can't read the rest of Vayikra chapter 23 without seeing this feast, because everything is based on this feast, well, except for one. Everything is based on this feast. I guess that could be argued too. I'm not going to get into what I just said. I just delete that I said that. But it is the festival of the new moon. And we see this in Isaiah chapter 66. They will come before me from one new moon to another, from one Shabbat to another, to worship before me, says Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So the new moon is the marker for the festivals. We can't figure out when Passover is without the new moon. Passover then gives us the counting for first fruits. It gives us the beginning of the Feast of Matzah. It gives us the counting of the Omer. We go to Shavuot. Shavuot, though, and this is the one that I was kind of mentioning. Shavuot is actually not directly tied to the new moon, but yet it is tied to the new moon. Because if it had not been for the observance of the new moon on Passover, we would not be able to figure out when Shavuot is. Feast of Trumpets. I mean, that one's really easy. The 10th day of the 7th month of Yom Kippur, of Sukkot. All of these are tied to the new moon. So the festival of the new moon is there in Leviticus chapter 23. However, it's not directly mentioned. Though something is not directly mentioned, doesn't mean we should not be observing it. Because we should be looking not just for what it says. When maybe, I'll use just a crazy term. Kathy might say, hey, the trash can is full. Okay. Well, I can just agree with that. Yeah, it is. Or I can kind of take the hint. That means that I should probably take the trash, the trash bag out of the trash can. And I should probably put a new trash bag in the trash can. And I should probably take the old bag with the trash in it, as we have to do here in North Carolina. I should probably take that to the dump. Now, she didn't say all those things within the context of the trash can's full, but I know the whisper behind it. I know that this is, she's just a reminder of it's full, and this is what you need, this is what I have accepted my responsibility in my home. And so just because something is not in the black and white of the scripture doesn't mean we should just become, should I say, lazy and gloss over it. So let's look at each one of the festivals. Of course, Passover, our redemption. Passover, going back to the garden, when I believe when the Creator slayed one of His own creation, shed the blood of His creation in order to bring forth the robes of righteousness. Passover is the release of the Hebrews out of Egypt. Passover is our own personal redemption. Passover will be, at some point, I think, is my understanding today at least, that Passover will one day bring forth the beginning of the kingdom, that greater exodus, whatever that may look like. This is all Passover. It's about our redemption, our being set free from the bondage of Egypt, from the bondage of slavery, from the bondage of sin. And that takes us to the festival of Matzah. Now, I know we call it the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The festival of Matzah would be maybe a better term for it. And what is matzah? What is it? It's the bread that was it does not have the yeast. It did not have time for the leaven to come into it. It's an overgrown saltine cracker. Okay, and you wonder why people think we're crazy. Is that once a year for 7 days we get excited about eating crackers? Okay. Yeah, there is a reason your family doesn't understand you, okay? But they don't understand because maybe we haven't explained it to them. Maybe they don't have ears to hear yet, but okay, I got that. But maybe we haven't explained it in a proper manner, that matzah is a very simple bread. What does it take? Flour and water. There's no seasonings there. And you put a little salt on it, of course. But there's no yeast, there's no, you don't mix a whole bunch. It's just supposed to be simple. And isn't that what our redemption is? That the problem with mankind is, one of the problems with mankind is complicating that which is to be simple. The 7 days of unleavened bread should teach us this, that though our redemption was very costly, it is also very simple. And when we try to complicate it, we lose focus on what it really is. The Messiah, His death, His burial, His resurrection, so that I may live. It's really, in the end, no more complicated than that. But yet, it also brings forth other aspects of our life. One of those being first fruits, which lies in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is a reminder that the reason that we can bear fruit in life is because of Him. Because He is the first fruits of the resurrection. And so the fruit that we bear in Messiah should be different than the fruit that we bore outside of Him. See, our lives, they bear fruit. Some good, some not. But through the power of a resurrected Messiah, the fruit that we bear in our lives should be different than that which we used to bear. It should be something that brings honor to His name, not profaning His name. We should not be bringing fruit that is a GMO. We should not be bringing fruit that's like a hybrid. which is Constantine, Marcion, many of the church fathers that changed the scripture into their own understanding, into something that is, it's not that it doesn't quite look like, fruit. It's a hybrid. What are we bringing? I went to the store yesterday and I finally found some collards. I'm running a little bit late this year, but so is the weather. We've had like 4 different seasons since February here in North Carolina. So I was able to purchase some hybrid collards. And Kathy looked at those. She said, "What are they?" Because they look totally different than collards today. Not hybrid, heirloom collards. They look totally different. And you know something? In the end, they taste different because it is the heirloom. It is it hasn't had man mess with it. And we should be bringing fruit. We should be desiring to bring fruit that doesn't have our fingerprints on it, doesn't have man's fingerprints, but has his fingerprint. We should be bringing heirloom fruit, not hybrid fruit. Now, the Counting the Omer, which we're in right now, the 50 days of Counting the Omer is what? It's anticipation. That we're considering that there's, as the rabbinical statement has been, that you have not truly observed Passover until you've observed Shavuot. Now, I again believe that the garden, that all of these what is now called the spring festivals, were actually in the garden from Passover to Shavuot, the giving of the skins. Can't prove that. It's something I feel is. Adam and Eve didn't know what was, maybe they saw in the distance the animal being killed. They didn't know what was next. They didn't know that the skins were being tanned for their own covering of righteousness. They didn't know if maybe they were going to be next, There was an anticipation, but they didn't know what it was. The Hebrews coming out of Egypt, they had an anticipation. Coming through the Reed Sea on the Feast of First Fruits, they had an anticipation, but they really had no idea what was in front of them. The tragedy for us is that sometimes in reading the scripture, we know the end so well that we forget that it's still a process that we're walking out. I mean, for us, our redemption in Messiah, but yet what's down the road? And then they come to Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah. What is Shavuot? What is called in Christianity Pentecost? What is that? Of course, this is the one festival that many denominations go after, okay, ignoring all the rest of them. But this is one. I was there. I was, Assembly of God. If you were Church of God, all of those things. I mean, Shavuot, Pentecost was a major day for you. But having no idea what it was about, in fact, the same church, I'm not being judgmental because that's what I thought too. The same church that was celebrating Pentecost was saying that what was given to the Hebrews on Pentecost was done away with. I mean, talk about not making any sense. But that's where many of us were. And the scary part is that used to make sense to me. I mean, when I think about what used to make sense to me, sometimes it scares me. It really does. Because now I understand that Shavuot was not the giving of something of bondage, but Shavuot, the Torah given to the Hebrews on Mount Sinai, was the giving of freedom. It was a new way of life. This is very simple. A new way of life, not death, not bondage, not slavery. I had someone the other day that said, jokingly, said, "So you don't eat pork?" I said, "No, No, I don't. He said, but bacon tastes so good. And I laughed and I said, yeah, I know what it tastes like. I know how good it tastes, but that doesn't make any difference. Because see, I understand today the whole, and it wouldn't matter if I understood this or not, but I understand the health problems related to pork, to shellfish, to rattlesnakes, to spiders, all of those things, that stuff that's mentioned in Leviticus chapter 11, he gave us those things for our life. If we just accept that his word is about our life and not bring him something, a life that is, well, I'm just going to kind of change this around because, if I actually start living like this, I'm probably going to offend this person. I had to go through that same thing as many of you did. I grew up in the South. We had pork in everything, including the dessert. The pie crust had pork in it, guys. There was lard in that thing, and it tasted good. And when I went to my family and said, I no longer, speaking of collard greens, you had some ham hock in there. That's what you use to season it. Now, Kathy has found that a smoked turkey leg, it's much better than ham ever was. Not as greasy, and it's got amazing flavor, hint, hint. But in case I happen to be staying at your house. But what happened in those days, stay on track here, what happened in those days is when I told my mother of blessed memory, I told my cousin, they got a little offended there. I remember my cousin, who I love her dearly, but I remember the day when she looked at me and she said, well, it was good enough for you for all these years. What's wrong with it now? We both laugh about that day, of course, at this moment. But, I had to choose. Who am I going to offend? Because when we see the commandments, and we consider that the commandments are for us today, and then we choose, we have to make a choice. Am I going to walk in that commandment? Or am I going to walk in, I don't want to offend my mother-in-law, or I don't want to offend a spouse, when you break a commandment, when you come to the opportunity, let me rephrase that. When you come face to face with a commandment, and that commandment goes against our society, you and I are faced with the dilemma that we're going to offend someone. Is it going to be my God or my relative? My God or my friends? Who am I going to offend? Very simple. For me, the answer, and I think probably for most of you, the answer is very, very simple. The Shavuot, Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, literally the Day of Sounding. We could translate this as the day of making some noise. And that's why it said that you should be hearing the shofar 100 times on that day. The day of making noise. Why? Because we have entered into a different realm. The day of Yom Teruah, I believe, is the day of the kingdom. This is the day that we begin to enter in. And when we get to, of course, that day later on in the year, I'll teach much more on this. But it's the day that we enter into the concept of the kingdom. Isaiah chapter 2 starts becoming real to us. We see the transitions that are happening in this world. Messiah is now turned the house into his home. the constitution of Eretz, of the world, of the land of Israel. The Constitution is the Torah. All the restaurants are having to reprint their menus or tear pages out of their menus because they no longer. We were at a restaurant the other night and somebody ordered octopus. It was like, or squid or something. It was like, yuck. The restaurants have to change. Walmart, if it exists, which probably won't, will not have a Christmas section. Will not have a Halloween section. There will be no Easter section. Probably a few other festivals there too. That section of the store will be totally erased because the world will be entering into a place of his festivals. In fact, as Zechariah tells us, if they are not observing the feast of Sukkot, which means that they didn't observe the feast of Passover, because you can't actually observe Sukkot properly without observing Passover, it will not have rain. So they're going to have to go like for 6 months between Sukkot and Passover without any rain in their land, which means that during that 6 months they're going to have a bit of time of introspection. What are we going to do? When Passover comes around, what are we going to do? Are we going to continue in our pagan ways? Are we going to continue doing things our way, or are we going to do it his way? What's it going to be? We all have a choice. The choice will be for the nations. Those of us that were redeemed, those of us part of the first resurrection, we will have already made that choice. But the choice will be then for the nations of this world of what they will do. And this will be Yom Teruah, the day of sounding, the day of making noise, for the kingdom is now upon us. The house is now a home. Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is, I think, in many ways misunderstood. But let me look at it like this, that maybe Yom Kippur should be considered as the first day that we actually enter into into his presence. Now, I got time and numbers of people and all those things, and I don't understand how this is all going to work. I really have no clue. But I understand this, that is a picture. It's a picture of us, of each of us personally, walking in to his presence. Now, could we call it exam day? Well, maybe examination day would be better. It's the day that going back to the grading of our lives. You know, we wanted an A++, but this is really the day that we figure out what we actually got. You remember a test from school and many moons ago? You took a test and you walked away and you went, wow, I aced that one. I got an A on that one, and it ends up being a D. That was usually what I did. But you came out of there knowing, feeling like you had done a good job, when in fact it was really not that good to begin with. Now, okay, I got the answer here. Yes, the answer, the grade regarding redemption was A++. Because in our redemption, in the forgiveness of our sin, we didn't take that test. We cheated, okay? And he allowed us to cheat. It is, consider sitting down, desk side by side, and you're given a test and you have no earthly idea what any answer is. There's no way that you can succeed. There's no way you can pass it. And the teacher says, just look to your right the guy next to you has the ability to make an A plus on the test. He's going to ace it, and I'm giving you permission to copy his answers. That's a different way. You probably never heard Yeshua, Messiah, spoken of in that manner. But, regarding redemption, we cheated, folks. We looked at his answers. We looked at his tests, and he was acing the test. And because we were allowed to copy his answers, we aced the test also. I got that. Regarding redemption, A plus, period. No way around it. No room for conversation there. But what about the lifestyle that, well, I wanted to at least get a B because I didn't strive for an A. I settled for something in the middle. I settled for average. When we settle for average in this world, we profane his name. We should all be striving for being the best at making him look good. Sukkot, his kingdom, his home. It is now set up upon this earth. In Leviticus chapter 23, it's 8 days. In reality, it's 1,000 years. 1,000 years of Sukkot. Wow. And we're not living in tents and campers anymore. We're not living in our makeshift things. It is now, Sukkot is no longer temporary. Sukkot is permanent upon this earth for 1,000 years. One last thought. Chapter 24, verse 11, kind of a little strange verse. In the course of which the son of the woman of Israel uttered the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in a curse. And you can read the context there. I hope you do. Upholding his name, reverencing his name. We should do everything in our lives possible to reverence his name. The fourth, the third commandment is do not use the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in vain. Of course, this has been relegated to one specific curse that is very prevalent in our society today. But consider that maybe, I believe that's wrong, and refuse to have words like that go over my lips. But at the same time, it's much more complicated than that. Just using his name flippantly is something that I have a friend of mine who's either an agnostic or an atheist, and it's amazing how many times he uses the name of God. It's amazing how many times he utters the word Jesus. It's like, I just want to look over and go, wait a minute, why, this is craziness. But what about you and I? It's one thing for someone, but terms like, and I'm just going to use terms like, oh my God. Is that not, I just don't see it reverencing him. I see it as just using his name flippant. Let's uphold his name. Let's put it to the highest standard that we possibly can through our lives. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Continue in the county of the Omer. And until next week, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha Vayasem lecha Shalom.